we're going to discuss characteristics of a function. So we're looking at a function. There's some things we want to be able to identify from the function. And one is where the function is positive versus where it is negative. So when we think about a function, we input the x values. The resulting values, or the function's values, f of x, are the output. So when we're inputting x values, where are the outputs positive? That means they're going to be above the x-axis, and it's going to occur in this region and in this region. So those are the positive values. So that's where the graph is positive. Where the graph is negative is where our answers are in the negative region or below the x-axis. And that occurs here and here in the orange, and that is negative. So when we're defining where a graph is positive or negative, we're going to define it in terms of the x values. So it is positive from negative infinity up until this value. Then it's negative from here until 0. Then the graph is positive from 0 over to this x value, and then negative from this x value to infinity. So positive and negative. Then we also talk about where the graph is increasing versus decreasing. So when we're thinking about increasing or decreasing, we're going to read the graph just like we read a book from left to right. So if we start furthest left and work our way across, I always like to start and read left to right. So we start furthest left and work our way across. The graph starts off high and decreases going down low. So this region, the graph is decreasing. Then we get to what we call a turning point. And from that turning point, we switch directions and begin to increase. So it increases up until the next turning point, in which the graph begins to decrease again. So in this particular graph, we're decreasing, increasing, and then decreasing again. We always read from left to right. The increasing and decreasing, where those turning points are special points on a graph called the extrema. So those turning points are the extrema, which we talk about in the next section. The extrema are the maxes or mins. And we can have a relative minimum or a relative maximum, but we can also have what we call absolute. And I'm going to write that over here. Minimum and absolute maximum. Just like the word sounds, it's the absolute lowest or highest point. So when we're talking about a graph that has even behavior, so both ends go the same way, an absolute minimum is the lowest point possible on the function, and an absolute maximum would be the highest point possible. So if we're looking at these graphs, the highest possible point on the whole function would be here. So those are absolute. The relative means in relation to the points around it, it is a high or low point. So this point right here, in relation to the points on either side of it, is lower than those points. And this point up here is higher. So when we think about those turning points where the graph goes from down, decreasing to increasing, where it turns is always going to be a minimum or a maximum. The last thing we're going to talk about is end behavior. And when we talk about end behavior, we're looking at the behaviors at the end. And there's nice arrows at the end of the function that are going to direct us to what the end behaviors are. When we write our end behaviors, we're going to write it as x moves towards negative infinity, f of x moves towards, and we're going to look to see where the arrow is going. So as we go towards negative x values, the arrow is pointing up, which is positive infinity. And then as x goes towards positive x values, f of x, the function, is going, and if you look at the arrow at that end,